This is Marketing from the Front Lines, where we speak with B2B marketers who are in the trenches, bringing technology to market. Here's your host, Brett Stapper, CEO of Frontlines.io.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to Marketing from the Front Lines. Today we're speaking with Jocelyn Nowak, Marketing and Sales Enablement Lead at FIGUR8. Jocelyn, how are you?
I am phenomenal. Couldn't be happier.
Amazing. Super excited to have you here on the podcast. So how we like to begin these conversations with the big question, why and how did you end up in this world of marketing?
So I don't really know, Brett. I think I took a lot of lofty steps following people I aspire towards in healthcare technology. Started out in operations as an associate, doing customer support, and very quickly saw that our team needed marketing, sales support. And through the 8 different technology startups I've seen the inside of in the last decade or so, I've somehow found my way into marketing. And I really think it's because marketing does sit at the intersection of nearly every function within an organization. And one of my gifts and one of the things I love to do is manage teams cross-functionally, communicate cross-functionally, and find efficient ways to do that asynchronously, because I love being remote. I do love being in office sometimes and the interconnectedness you receive when you're with people like that. But that flexibility that comes with remote culture really led me kind of where I am as well.
And did you always know you were going to end up in healthcare, or where did that tie-in come from?
It's funny. I feel like healthcare is like a bug you can't get rid of. It's like once it bites you, you've kind of got it. You've got the healthcare bug. It's going to follow you your whole life. And when I was 14 years old, my parents were pushing me to get a job, not too hard, but gently. I lived in upstate New York, a really rural area, and one of the only spots in town was a small regional pharmacy, Kinney Drugs. So I walked in at 14 years old thinking I was applying to the front desk and kind of just checking people out. But they saw that I had the ambition and want to do more. So I became a pharmacy technician, and that's where things started. Since then, almost 2 decades. Jocelyn, you're getting there. 2 decades in healthcare. I never really gave it up the whole time I was in my undergraduate and then moving into the business world. I've got a degree in exercise science, so there's an anatomy and physiology side of the work I've done in healthcare. And coming out of college, I jumped right into working at a scoliosis clinic, specializing in spinal injuries with children. Started as an aide, kind of doing the hands-on, but I think that my business acumen just kept coming to the top, and I slowly became the case manager, then the clinic director, and we 4x'd our revenue in 2 years. Things were moving fast. And it wasn't long before I intersected that job into a long runway with tech-based healthcare startups. When you live in Silicon Valley long enough, which is what I was doing right out of college, you eventually get sucked into the stratosphere of technology, I think. So it was a mix of the healthcare experience I've had for a long time and being in such a technology-focused and innovations-focused community in Silicon Valley.
I have a lot that I want to unpack there, but before I dive deeper, let's maybe zoom out a little bit and just tell the audience what FIGUR8 does. Obviously, we had your founder on our other podcast, Category Visionaries. She's amazing, but a lot of people listening today probably haven't heard that podcast. So at a high level, what does the brand do? Or what's the company do?
I love FIGUR8, first of all. So I'm excited to share what we do. And it's challenging to describe the impact because what we do can shift the standard of care so greatly. But what we're doing is very simple. When you think of going to a physical therapy office or a physical exam, oftentimes the exam is highly subjective. There's patient-reported outcomes like I feel 5 on a 1 to 10, although I'd say I'm closer to a 7 or 8. I'm feeling pretty good right now. You can report that, and that's a subjective measure from the individual. A lot of times a provider might visually view someone moving slowly or exhibiting signs of pain. And there hasn't been a really clear or consistent way of understanding how someone's muscle is moving beyond doing these giant tests in facilities that require a whole room to be fitted with cameras. There's this Vicon technology. It's a video system that they use in, creating 3D models and measuring different form for professional athletes. These exams and recordings can take 4 to 6 hours, even longer. They cost thousands of dollars, and the data has to be interpreted by a specialist. So this kind of information has really been inaccessible as it relates to evaluating physical health. Unlike an EKG, you can know exactly what's going on with your heart. You can know exactly what's going on with your inflammation through blood tests. But with the musculoskeletal system, it's been a little lacking. So Figure8's taken all this technology that's existed for decades and lives in these giant rooms and put it into a form factor that is the size of your laptop. And you can find it at over 3,000 different physical therapy clinics across the United States that we've partnered with, where they actually use it as part of their assessment to gather biomechanical data on an individual patient during recovery, or even as a preventive measure when screening and evaluating musculoskeletal health. So it's a big one.
3,000. That's insane, isn't it?
Yes, it is. And actually, that's where, I've been inside 8 different healthcare technology startups, and I feel so grateful to be on a team that's already having such great impact and so broad and wide acceptance from the physical therapy community, where you're really working with musculoskeletal experts. These physical therapists, they eat, sleep, and breathe anatomy. They're watching injuries all the time. And it's so validating to have them be excited about our technology consistently. And what we always hear in the market is, as the marketing lead, I don't know if this is a good or a bad thing, that we almost undersell ourselves, in that the impact we can have is so great, down to getting patients to adhere and be motivated to their care by seeing their recovery, by switching care pathways to something a little bit more aligned with what you need based on, hey, this doesn't look like it's recovering, or it looks like it's reached its max. Let's try something different. Or deciding you're better a little bit earlier. And we're already seeing 20 to 40% faster recovery on the claims data feedback that we're getting. So it's a gift for me as a marketer. It's a matter of just keeping up with what needs to be produced from a content perspective when you're at that Series A stage.
I mean, it's pretty rare, I would say, for startups to be told that they're underselling themselves. I think the opposite is normally true. So you're doing something right. I think that's a compliment, especially in healthcare, right? It's not enterprise software or just software in general. Like, it's people's health at the end of the day. So probably shouldn't be BSing too much, like I think a lot of Silicon Valley does.
Exactly. And that's where it's so interesting noticing the difference, honestly, between working with ventures based out of the West Coast versus the East Coast. And I've worked with both extensively. I'm currently in Los Angeles, but I spent half my time in New York. So I get to dabble in both. And it's always a little shock when you go back into one pond versus the other. But I do find that, the messaging is a little bit different with Figure8. And I think part of that is just the speed of adoption we've experienced as well, where it's like, woo, we've got to start publishing some of this. This is really interesting and exciting. And it is true, I think, at the corner or the center really of a healthcare venture has to be the ethical alignment of the entire team. And that's something I'm grateful to say that we do have at Figure8, where if you talk to our engineering lead, he's constantly thinking about the ethics of what it is that's being produced and shown. Our product team is very aware of making it simple, easy, but also transparent, everything that's going on. And our president even has a JD, it's like he's on the commercial side of things. We've got people thinking from a legalistic, thoughtful perspective, and then also just an ethical user experience perspective constantly. So for me, in the marketing sales enablement world, it's just a matter of trying to keep up with the type of content that we do want to produce, because there's a lot, and it's a gift to have this mountain of things that needs to get done.
When you look at that growth, and we talked about that's very, very impressive growth, what do you think you're getting right as a marketing leader? What are you getting right now?
That's a tough question, because it's very easy when you are pushing the boundaries of your capacity to feel like you're getting things right every day. I'm going to be honest, Brett, like I definitely go back and forth sometimes, but reflecting on this honestly earlier today, I was thinking how much I've changed in my career to be able to slow things down a little bit internally so that we make sure we have true alignment. The clinical team is reviewing all our content because we want it to be clear. We want it to be ethical. We want to use words that aren't, sensationalized. As a marketer, it's very easy for me to go into, this is the best thing you've ever had in your life. But the reality is that's not what we need to do. We can report objectively on the reality of our product. And it really speaks to the product as well, because what we're doing is bringing objectivity to healthcare in a place where there's been heavy subjectivity for a long time. So I really think the culture that we have around making decisions as to how the content comes out has made things really clean. We expect more and more content to be produced as we input new kind of machinery on the back end. And we just are being very thoughtful about the foundation and ensuring it's as ethical and transparent as possible.
This show is brought to you by Frontlines Media, a podcast production studio that helps B2B founders launch, manage, and grow their own podcast. Now, if you're a founder, you may be thinking, I don't have time to host a podcast. I've got a company to build. Well, that's exactly what we built our service to do. You show up and host, and we handle literally everything else. To set up a call to discuss launching your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. Now, back to today's episode.
How would you describe your marketing philosophy? The words I keep hearing are ethical, so I think ethical would be part of it, transparent. Yeah. How would you describe your philosophy?
I think integrity is the one word that encompasses everything. And for a long time, and this is probably why I haven't zhuzhed up my LinkedIn and gone wild on anything for a while, is I was raised to believe that sales and marketing are not the kind of jobs that I would want, and it's not like I was ever deterred from one thing or another. I had a really healthy upbringing, but my dad's a professor. My brother's got a PhD. My other brother's teaching classes. Like everybody's coming from this very educational academic background. And I think that still sits at the core of who I am as it relates to integrity. But it made me hesitate with the marketing and sales side of the world because so much of what we see, especially in the direct-to-consumer space, can be manipulation. And I hate to use that word because it feels a little like sticky, but that's the reality of what you can do. And marketing to me is a high integrity event. It's something where you get the gift of sharing and finding the right people who need what you have. And especially in healthcare, when you're seeing people recover faster, when you're seeing providers be able to justify the care that they're providing, which is huge with our complex insuring system. It's like these providers sometimes have to jump through hoops to show what it is they're doing. And here we are with these data points that no one can refute. So it's a gift to be able to bring that messaging to the world in a way that's very high integrity and thoughtful, so you could be a place of trust when you receive healthcare.
That's such an important word. And I feel like not many marketers embrace that word. Like my wife jokes, she says that I destroyed her Instagram experience because I just told her that every marketer is, full of shit, basically. And she's they're lying for the most part. So she would see these products, like, oh my God, it solves this problem. You have like this baby. It's like, oh, it solves this problem for our baby. It's like, no, it's just marketers. They're lying to you or manipulating you. They're convincing you that you either have a problem that you don't have, or they're convincing they have a solution that doesn't actually work, which I feel like that's most products are just doing that.
It's like consumerist engine that we've been fed into, where it's like a lot of marketers, and I empathize with them, to be honest. Like I'm in a gifted position to be at an organization who sees marketing in a holistic way. I've been in environments and seen environments where there's so much pressure put on metrics that don't necessarily measure success, but do measure stealing attention. And this reminds me of a book I read. It's called Stolen Focus by Johann Hari, and it's phenomenal. It's all about how since the printing press was invented, we have been losing our attention because everyone's trying to grab it. And especially now with our digital environment, with our political environment, with all the dichotomization that is kind of propagated by this printing press machine, our attention has been stolen and monetized. And that's where even honestly, when I listen to podcasts on marketing, which I don't honestly do too often, I do when I'm seeking solutions and feeling inspired. But when I do, unfortunately, 50 to 70% of the time I stop listening because it's not the kind of marketing that I do. This is a high integrity job that's really transparent, and really I've let go of opportunities from a Jocelyn getting revenue perspective because it didn't align with me as a high integrity person. And I want that to translate to my work. So thank you for calling out what I was feeling, coming into this field and not bragging about marketing. I don't lead with, hey, I'm a marketer, because most people don't have a super positive response because marketers often are stealing our focus, stealing our attention. And there's nothing more beautiful than being present. So being in a field that is known to take that away from people is something that I want to bring integrity back into.
On the topic of focus, I have to show you this because it's by my desk. I have this little box.
Oh my gosh,
I
yes.
put my phone in there for 8 p.m. I put my phone in. I don't take it out till 7 a.m. That's been a new habit in 2025, and it's been awesome. I'm so much more present with my family. I get more work done. It's been
Wow.
great, but it's hard. Like I sit there and like stare at it sometimes. Like, oh, what's that text? I gotta hear that.
I mean, that's beautiful though. And like, I would be curious, like, has that impacted your ability to get work done? Because that's what people are afraid of. And that's not been the case for me when I set boundaries. But what's it been like on your end?
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's impacted in a positive way. There's been a few things that I had to deal with of just like shifting like tasks that I do. Like I normally like, process payments in the evening and everything has two-factor authentication. So I had to like readjust my schedule to like process payments, during like the actual workday before I put it in the box because I felt bad. Like, what do I need to process? Like payroll, do all these things, like
Yeah.
phone box. So that's why it's actually broken at the side. I had to break into the box one time.
Oh my gosh.
But it's been awesome.
I mean, that's a good boundary because here you are with your family. And that's where I talk about integrity and boundaries all the time because in business, and even my family jokes about when I accidentally start dropping into business speak at dinner or like, business, you're all official. You've got to do things a certain way. And it's like, well, business can bring us closer and more deeply interconnected. And I look at the international connections I have with some contractors and team members that are such a gift and for everyone involved. And it's like, how could this be a bad thing? Humans have always come together in one way, shape, or form. And the challenge is, what is power versus what is force, and making sure that we stay grounded in the reality of what it is to be a humble human being as we go through these growth experiences. Because there's some ego involved. It can get overwhelming when you're on a wild ride of the business world, especially in the startup space where, I mean, it's emotional. It's emotional, and we are emotional creatures regardless of what we say on paper. So setting boundaries and keeping to your core is really important.
You seem like someone who has a lot of positive habits in your life. What's your most positive habit that you have that you recommend? If people are starting, like I shared my phone box. Do you have anything like that or any habits that you put in place that have had a major positive impact on your life?
I think that I have a lot of practices that I'm aware of so that I can key into them when I need them. And I am a trained Reiki teacher and yoga teacher. I've trained in ninjutsu and qigong and herbalism. So I've played with all these different modalities that have to do with self-regulation and awareness. And when it comes to routines and daily practices, they're very simple. I might contemplate the Reiki precepts, do not anger, do not worry, be grateful, have compassion for yourself and others, and do your work diligently. Never forget that one. But you contemplate what it is that grounds you in reality when you're walking the dogs. It's like I make my walks very intentional. I don't bring my phone. I actually, speaking of phones, have a flip phone. Yes, I really went analog when I moved to LA part-time. It wasn't a choice, but it felt like the force of nature where I tried for weeks to get my phone back and just wouldn't give up on trying to get my 20-year-old phone number. And you have the track phone long enough. And even though people raise their eyebrows if your iPhone's out at the same time, I guarantee them it's for pictures of my dogs and I'll upgrade it at some point. But that's been a huge gift is, separating some of the technology and digital from my time with my dogs, leaning on the practices that have served me as it relates to Reiki and yoga, but also just knowing that everyone's path is different. And sometimes the greatest practice is just sitting in beingness, whenever you can, and just breathing in and feeling that breath and remembering to be in your body because it's so easy to spend time up here and there's a whole system going on here and it's always giving us that biofeedback, which we can measure with musculoskeletal care at FIGUR8. No, I'm just kidding. But it's giving you that biofeedback constantly of like what it needs. And I even do intuitive eating, like smelling it, making sure this is what my body wants. Is it sauerkraut today? Or is it, the pistachio cream? I don't know. Either one are good, but very different profiles and your body tells you. So just being present and leaning on the practices that have come to me organically in my life is really where it's at.
You mentioned dogs there. I have a dog as well. She's like 7 years old, a really nice Labradoodle. That has to be like the number one habit that's changed my life for the better, I would say. Like it makes me like, go on walks. Yeah, similar to what you were describing. I used to like, okay, that's podcast time or music time. Now I'm like, no, that's like probably my only time of the day to go and just like be present and chill. And that's like magical time. I think having a dog is such a life hack from that perspective.
I just saw something this morning that said dogs increase like joy and productivity and happiness by like 30%, but cats are just neutral. And don't get me wrong, I love cats, but I was dying. And when I got my dog, that was the whole purpose, was like to force myself to step away. And the more I force myself to step away, the more clarity and creativity I can bring to my, business version of Jocelyn, because she likes to come out, she likes to work, but there's this creative flow that you get from being free from the tech and present in nature that is really a gift.
What kind of dog is it? I have to ask, of course.
I have two little babies. They add up to the size of one dog. I have a Chihuahua mutt Papillon thing. He's about 8 pounds. And then my Piper, she is a wiener Aussie. So she looks like a mini Australian Shepherd, and she's got the attitude of a wiener dog, the working energy of an Aussie. So it's a funny little combo with my Chihuahua sleeping 20 plus hours a day and my other dog policing everybody who walks by with her working dog energy. Yeah.
This show is brought to you by the Global Talent Co., a marketing leader's best friend in these times of budget cuts and efficient growth. We help marketing leaders find, hire, vet, and manage amazing marketing talent for 50 to 70% less than their US and European counterparts. To book a free consultation, visit globaltalent.co.
Have you mastered walking with 2 dogs? Whenever I think about getting a second dog, I just think like logistically, it must be very, very difficult.
It's funny because I feel like I'm composing music. I'm like,
Yeah.
and it's so natural now. I've had them together for 6 or 7 years at least. I don't even know. Time is relative, but they've been together a long time. And I have this, like, they loop in a certain way and I twist my arm and it's like, we have this whole dance. But when I ask like my partner to walk them, it's like they're just tangling up with each other. The dance is not quite as fluid, but they're getting their own groove, dancing with the dogs.
That's my fear, is that I'll look like that person with it'll take a while.
When I get tangled up, it's always a good conversation starter.
So funny. Let's talk a little bit about, we talked about this pre-interview. It's almost like a survival guide. So, your team is small. It's you on the marketing side. That's not uncommon for startups. A lot of startups have teams that are that size. So for you, what advice would you have for other marketers who are in a similar position or joining a company where they are the one marketer on the team?
I think the earlier, the better when it comes to building systems of transparency. This is something I've learned, especially at Figure8, because the team is so actively involved in content production, which is beautiful and speaks to the ethics and integrity of the team. But it makes the review process challenging sometimes. And other times, people want to know what's the update here, what's the update here. And when you're a marketing team of one, it's like, okay, do you want me to deliver this tomorrow or do you want me to report on how it's going to be delivered? Because there's only so much time. And I'm good at having that conversation when it needs to happen. But as an individual, what I can do is from day one, start task tracking, start project management, even if it's just your own sheet that you're keeping a track of. It can be as simple as Google Sheets. It can be as complex as Asana or a Monday, but having some kind of system to hold yourself accountable so that when you do start ripping at the seams, because that's the reality of what's going on here, you're going to need to prioritize, and having a team prioritization makes a lot of sense. And that's something I've seen often where in previous startups as it relates to the marketing team, and I've been in business development as sales as well, but we've all been in the same soup. It's challenging to know exactly what marketing is working on when you're on the sales or BD team, because they might be doing something related to product and a product release and updating images, or doing something with the website or a press release. And the last thing you want to do when everyone's running at full pace is have a lack of trust where someone doesn't think you're listening, and think you're working on what they need. And with teams this small, it's pretty easy to be transparent. Mm-hmm. But as you scale, and you start bringing in new team members and they want to make marketing requests, having systems in place already is a huge asset, so that when you hit those seam points and the team's like, wait a minute, I need to know, you're like, here you go. I've got everything we need. We've been tracking. And you don't want to distract the team, because that can be very easy too with marketing. it's fun sometimes to do marketing. So I think it's very distracting at some point. So you want to be clear and transparent through systems that you build based on your own way of being, but sharing those with the team and maintaining that transparency throughout the whole review process can alleviate a lot of stresses that come with scalability.
What about talking through how marketers should think about making the decision to go into tech? So I think there's probably a lot of people listening in who aren't in tech yet, but they're thinking about moving into tech, but tech is a different beast. How should they evaluate, like, am I good for tech? Am I not good for tech? Like, any thinking there?
I mean, I think that there does have to be a comfortability with asynchronous communication that doesn't come naturally if you're not in tech yet. So it might be a skill that you've developed through Discord channels and Reddit with friends, and you might be like, oh, no problem. But that's one barrier that I anticipate for some people, just because even with my friends, I'll send them a Google invite or something if we're getting lunch. And it's like, I don't know if they ever see it, but if it's not on my calendar, it's not happening. And it's like, you just develop these ways of being when you're in tech for so long and ways of communicating that might be challenging to jump into. So any research that you could do in that space, or even just start playing with some of the tools, because there's so many free trials of a lot of tools out there that you could start playing. And I would say really just don't be afraid, because I know tech is different. And some of the differences just come from the mentality of being in tech, because you are thinking of industry in a faster paced way, in a different way. But don't be afraid of that. If you feel this innate gut feeling that like that's the space for you to be in, there's wonderful work boards. I know there's one called Well Found. That's an incredible resource if you're looking to get into startups and find an associate level role. You can always reach out to mentorship networks too, but I just say don't be afraid. If you're willing to learn and you have the want to be on computers and playing that way, it can get exhausting. Like, there is some level of constantly being interconnected that can feel overwhelming. So going into it knowing I'm going to have to scale up my ability to communicate synchronously, and I'm going to need to be able to move in a way that is seamless and fast with the culture of technology while maintaining the boundaries you need for your health and wellness, because it's very easy to get a Slack message at 9 p.m. and feel like you have to respond. It's very easy to see a note from the CEO at 2 a.m. that they don't expect you to respond to, but for some reason you think you have to respond. It's like there's this level of letting go of the hierarchy that we're used to and looking at reality in a very objective way, because that's how tech founders generally think. And that's how the culture of the teams is. We're reporting on objectivity, what is possible? What are we doing today? What's tomorrow's goals? And let's just be present with it, and when you can't show up or you are feeling overwhelmed, it's important to communicate that, because it's a arduous space to be in. And listen to podcasts for whatever sector you're interested in. That was huge when I was getting into the first AI startup I was at, which was diagnostic robotics out of Israel. Super interesting team, very early in the AI space relative to some of the competitors. And I had a mentor of mine give me a 6-part series on AI. And I know way more than I thought I would ever know. And I'm so grateful, but finding those courses can be really helpful and build your confidence too.
What about, further in that journey? So let's imagine it's, someone who's, okay, I'm sold, I'm going to move into tech. How do they evaluate companies to find the right company, the right opportunity? Or do you have a list of questions that you ask before you join? How do you think about assessing opportunity?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm grateful, or lucky and grateful, that I'm in a position of being really discerning with who I partner with. So I love this question. And I don't even think of it as, working for, it's partner with, because this is a relationship you're stepping into to an extent where there's a lot of energy impacting you from the culture of whatever job it is. And I think understanding the culture around the founder is really telling. And there's only so much you can detect during, the onboarding or research process. But if you go to your team leads or your founders' LinkedIn and you find yourself not liking it, maybe that's a bad idea. It's like any kind of gut feeling you get around it. I would say, especially in an early stage technology company or any early stage company, the culture that the founder has as an individual, how they work, how they communicate, that is going to directly impact you every day, regardless if you are actually communicating with them directly. And with Figure8, like I love Nanwei. She's one of the most down-to-earth people on the planet. I love working with a female founder. She's incredibly humble and direct. She does no nonsense when things are smelling fishy, and also doesn't take anything personally, very objective. So, looking for those characteristics during the interview process and being able to be your authentic self and have that received during the interview process is huge. So I think for me, it's asking the questions live that feel natural and good, being authentic about what you need and what your expectations are really helps level the playing field when you're jumping into this new relationship or venture, because it's all about you at the end of the day. I mean, it's like, I love my employers in that it's a gift to have worked with every single one of them. But the reality is, like, it's a job and I have to do what's good and healthy for me. And staying with Figure8 as long as I have, because, 2.5 years for me, jumping around startups is a pretty long time, definitely stems a lot from the trust and faith I have in Nanwei as a leader, and even the ethics and integrity I spoke about earlier that I've seen across the whole team that just lets me have faith that I'm in the right space.
Amazing. We always like to end with advice, and that was awesome advice. So we're going to wrap here, and we are on time. Now, before we do wrap, if there's anyone listening in that just wants to follow along with you and your journey, where should we send them?
So I do have a website that's just jocelynnowak.com. Good old Jocelyn. I do have a studio space in downtown LA called Peaceful Prosperity, where I do all the healing arts work and some mentorship for small businesses, mostly, people doing something a little bit smaller. And it's all donation-based, nice stuff. But that studio space is a place where I take meetings or we'll do lectures. So if you head to the website, it's peacefulprosperity.studio. And then we have jocelynnowak.com. You can find me.
Amazing. I love it. Well, thanks so much for taking the time. It's been a lot of fun.
Go team. Thanks, Brett.
This episode of Category Visionaries is brought to you by Frontlines Media, Silicon Valley's leading podcast production studio. If you're a B2B founder looking for help launching and growing your own podcast, visit frontlines.io/podcast. And for the latest episode, search for Category Visionaries on your podcast platform of choice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you on the next episode.